Brian, you've written this new book, You Never Know What You Have Till You Give It Away, and Other Important Lessons in Leadership. And I want to talk to you about the essential thesis of the book in a minute. You have a very interesting table of contents, various divisions of material. But one of your divisions is discerning the times. And you have been a really legend in Canada in terms of an evangelical leader who discerns the times. What's happening in our world as you see it with Tunisia and Egypt and Libya and this whole Middle Eastern world seemingly blowing up, generated by young people under 30 and Facebook and social networking and this distaste for despots and all of this. What do you think is going on in our world?
You move through major epochs in history. Remember the Muslim world up until the 15th century, the 1400s. They dominated much of Southern Europe and, of course, the Middle East. Under the Ottoman Empire, it had enormous influence right up until the end of the First World War. And so you have the Muslim world having an important and a senior effect in leadership in parts of the world. Then it went into almost seclusion. And now we're seeing the Muslim world come back into a new kind of self-awareness. And this self-awareness, the historians will write and tell us, but I surmise now that as the latter part of the 20th century moved the Muslim world into a greater sense of importance in the world vis-a-vis oil, which has been their source of revenue, it created these enormous empires. You've got Egypt, well, you got Saudi, you've got Iran, you've got Iraq. All of these, well, Iraq was a recent formation in the 20th century. But as these countries rose in financial power, then you have dictators or despots who take over usually by way of military might, and they become dominant. And they have governed the countries for better or for worse. But as the rest of the world has grown in democracy and in human rights, these countries, Saudi, Iran, and then Iraq, you've got Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, Syria, Yemen, those countries, they are now bursting with young people. So in most of these countries, over 50% of your people are under the age of 23 or 25. Just think of that population base. So this population base, like in Egypt, fairly well educated, but no jobs, and they become annoyed and restless under the dominance of these oligarchies. And then you have the fuses lit in Tunisia with that young man who was disallowed from selling vegetables because he doesn't have the right permit. And in his frustration, he burns himself, and that sets off the Middle East. So I think we're in a period of enormous change within that community, the search for a new kind of leader or search for a new kind of social political system that will allow people to operate within their Muslim world and all the dictates of whatever form of Islam they serve or they follow, and within the social economic contour. So there's a whole number of things going on internally, but I think on the broad sweep, we're seeing the rise of the Muslim world into a new kind of political sophistication.
There are those who pessimistically look at Egypt, even though Egypt has been held up as a standard for the rest of the world in terms of leading the way, and say really nothing has changed. The 30 years of emergency rule is still in effect. The military are still in power. Mubarak was a military person. He changed out of his uniform into a suit. He was 83 years of age. He was failing, and the army got what they wanted. A popular uprising as a kind of a smokescreen for getting rid of the old boy. And they're still in charge. And one wonders, there is such cultural and military inertia in these countries. One wonders if perhaps the democracy that we are all celebrating is maybe yet not to be born.
Oh, I agree. I'm not sure that I'm that cynical about the military in Egypt. By what I read, I think that they have that they probably are looking for a new form of leader, whether that would be a dictator like they've had. I don't know, but certainly the change has not occurred. The change rests with the popular uprising, and the question is, will that popular uprising continue to agitate until there is a fundamental shift within the political structure of Egypt? And that has yet to be determined.
Do you think it's an overstatement to say the day of the despotic autocrat is over?
No. Look in history, you keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
In some worlds, the Western world, Western Europe, North America, and many other countries that have been democratic. And remember, it took us a long time to become democratic and to work out the democratic ideals and the protocols. So for us to take a long time to find that, we've got to really allow these other countries to find their own form of democracy. But also, I think at the very heart of it is an understanding. For example, here in Canada, in the U.S., we're called a liberal, secular democracy. And by that liberal, we mean the autonomy of the individual. We don't mean to be nice or to be liberal. We mean liberal in the political science sense, that we base our culture on the freedom of the individual. So we are liberal. We are secular in that we don't allow a religious institution to use levers of political power. So we keep a separation between the church and state. Although that's more of an American idea, we haven't entrenched that in law in Canada as the Americans have. And then we're a democracy where the popular vote decides the leader. That's been formulated basically within a Christian community. Coming out of England, the great experiment, of course, was the U.S., and Canada followed the parliamentary system. But in Islam, you don't have a separation of religion and politics. They don't see the separation at all. In fact, they see them as one. So depending on the Islamic kind of faith, depending on that, you will have either an enormous influence by the religious leaders over politics like you have in Iran, or you'll have less of an influence by the religious leaders as you have in Indonesia. So the democracy that we aspire here in our country will look very different than to an Islamic country, depending on the form of Islam they follow. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, which is a very fundamentalist kind of Islamic community, they won't have the democracy as Egypt will have. So we're looking at leadership trying to, well, first of all, they attempt to find leaders, and to find leaders that have an idea that can take people from where they are to a new format of social organization.
Now, when you talk about leaders, of course, this brings me back to your book, You Never Know What You Have Till You Give It Away, and other important lessons in leadership. One of the questions you ask, and you're looking for the right leader, one of the questions you ask under the section, The Art of Leading, is meek weak? A lot of people are looking for the strong man.
Yeah.
What's the point you're making there?
Well, the word meek is a King James word used to describe Moses. Now, I never liked the word meek because it sounded like weak.
Right.
But meek is a powerful word. For example, a horse, a powerful, dynamic, high energy horse.